Welcome everyone to a Football for Fun video. I'm Depressed the Texans fan, and I'm very excited to bring you this series ranking the top 32 quarterbacks. So, in theory, these are the 32 quarterbacks who I deem as worthy to start, and this is based on, this year, so I'm not doing like projections like next 5 years or anything like that. And also, what I've realized is there are a lot of backups, and you realize how much of a shortage there are of good starting quarterbacks. However, there are 32 teams, so someone has to start in each position. Now, what I will disclaim is that, there are always going to be situations where maybe, like, the 37th best quarterback is better in a different offense than, like, the 31st, things like that. It's not all that definitive. But based on what I've seen, what I've studied, what I've heard, these are who I believe are the 32 guys who are worthy of starting spots in today's NFL. What I will also disclaim is, first of all, if you haven't seen from the title, we're actually ranking 32 to 17 today. And so the next quarterbacks coming up will be on future videos. Also, just note that this is football for fun. This isn't like football for profession, I guess. So all that to say, I haven't really watched film to like study for this. I mean, this is football for fun. I said that twice, but we'll move past that. So all that to say, if I say something anecdotally and it's just wrong, just forgive me in advance. I'm doing my best. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Also, another disclaimer, Canva was acting up, so as you can see, there's actually no one at 32. I do have pictures for everyone else, but clocking in at 32 will be Andy Dalton, who famously recently said that despite the Panthers drafting Bryce Young at number 1 overall, he still believes he's a starting quarterback in the league. And on the Saints last year, he had a pretty good season. I don't have the statistics, off the top of my head, but I think his passer rating was like 94. He had a pretty solid season. I think Andy Dalton, as are a few of these other guys, are just perfect examples of they can start games if they need to, but ultimately they're either bridge quarterbacks or just backups. So Andy Dalton fits in that category. Now coming in at 31, this is actually quite interesting. We have Trey Lance. Now Trey Lance, I believe, I'm really basing this off of his physical skill sets and what I believe he could be. I don't get why people are labeling him as a bust. I think in order to be properly labeled as a bust, you would need to play games and perform poorly. He just hasn't had the, starting experience. And I'm pretty confident that if you went to all 32 NFL teams and asked, would you rather roll with your starting quarterback or have Trey Lance? I'm confident that at least a few teams would choose Trey Lance. Obviously, there's a lot of unknown. I do feel like he could be top 16 in a year or two, but also he could be out of the league as strong, but he could be a total bust. It's very possible. So Trey Lance at 31. Number 30, we got Davis Mills. Go Texans. I don't know, but Davis Mills, yes, he was in a bad situation in Houston, which is why he's on the list. I think deep down that he's a backup, although I can also see him just being like a low-end starter. Now I will say, as a Texans fan, I didn't watch too much Texans football just because when you know that we're going to lose, it just really sucks and it's depressing. But from what I've seen, when I did sit down to watch the Texans play, he can distribute the ball, and he's actually a decent athlete. He can move around within the pocket and things like that. So, I don't know. I just don't think there's a trait that he's great at. And so that's why he's at number 30. Hopefully he can be in a better situation in the future and just get a chance to show off his skill sets. And moving on to number 29, we have Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew, he's just kind of had some weird situations. He was in Jacksonville, did all right there, had some good games, and then he's just sort of been a backup since. He was a backup, and he's been a backup in Philly. Now it looks like he's poised to start in Indianapolis, but obviously you have Anthony Richardson right behind him, who is going to succeed him at some point. Wait, was he on another team, or was it just Jacksonville and Philly? I think it was just Jacksonville and Philly, and then now he's on the Colts. So we'll see. I know a lot of people think that he could be a really productive starter in this league if he had the right weapons around him. I mean, we'll see. He'll have a chance in Indianapolis. You got Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman to throw to. We'll see what he can do and if he can be a starter, a solidified starter in this league, or if he's just a career backup. Moving in at number 28, I think this will get a lot of hate. Justin Fields. Now, yes, I do believe that Justin Fields has potential to become a top-end starter. He is very physically talented, kind of like Trey Lance and, say, Kyler Murray, who we may or may not see later. However, when it comes down to Justin Fields, his career pass rating's horrible. It's like 79, I think. He's 5-20 as a starter, and people will argue, oh, he can run. Yes, he can run, but it's different when he runs and only wins 5 games out of 25, whereas, say, 2019 Lamar. A lot of people hated on Lamar because he could only run, he can't throw, which, A, that's just false, and B, Lamar won games, with that method. Now, is it sustainable for like 10, 15, 20 years? Probably not. But my thing with Justin Fields is, yes, he can run, that's great, but so far, it has not won him very many games. So, we'll see if that changes. He has DJ Moore and Chase Claypool now. He does have some legitimate weapons, so I am more than happy to change my mind if he takes a step up. But moving on to number 27, a fellow Ohio State quarterback, CJ Stroud. Now, this is quite simply, I did include rookies on this list. It will technically remain to be seen how many rookies are on this list. This is really just based on projection. Historically, quarterbacks drafted at 1 or 2 overall have been decent and for the most part worthy of starting. I do think he has a lot of very solid traits that will translate to the NFL. I think the main question is, does he have like a super high ceiling or not? Because really how I see it, and I'll go ahead and spoil it, Anthony Richardson's not on this list. I think that this year, Anthony Richardson is not a top 32 quarterback because he needs to develop. The way I see it is I think that Anthony Richardson, he has a high ceiling as well as a high floor. So I could see Anthony Richardson, unfortunately, being like a top 10 quarterback. Whereas, can CJ Stroud be like top 10? I'm not sure. That would be awesome, but I just see CJ Stroud as more like just kind of stalling as far as his potential goes, whereas Anthony Richardson, he could be out of the league or he could be like a superstar. Moving on to number 26, we have Baker Mayfield. Now, Baker, I think he's a little bit overhated as far as like being a bust goes. He's not worthy of the number 1 overall selection where he was drafted. However, I think he's a starter in this league, although he's going to have to prove it in Tampa, because if he doesn't do well with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to throw to, then he's just going to be a career backup. If that, even. He might just do a Carson Wentz and just, like, not sign with a team. Who knows? But he did take the Browns to the playoffs, like, a couple years ago, won a playoff game with the Browns, and, yeah, I think... Yeah, I was gonna say something else, but I think he fits here at number 26, like worthy of starting, but still just low end starter, at best at this point in his career. Moving on to number 25, we have Kenny Pickett. Now, he did have a bit of a rough start to his rookie season, although he started to show flashes. So, really, this just remains to be seen. I would expect Kenny Pickett to go up from here. He's in a great organization and has some like elite weapons to throw to. Well, elite's strong, but Pittsburgh always has very solid receivers. So really this is more or less of an unknown. He could easily be like number 16 or something like that. I don't really see him regressing that much, especially in Pittsburgh, but this sort of remains to be seen. At number 24, we have Ryan Tannehill. Now, apologies, again, Canva was acting up. I think this is the only one to where the background remover didn't really work, but I've always thought that Ryan Tannehill was underrated. I think really until last year, I always thought he was like top 16 or something like that. I think he was definitely overhated, and I still believe he's a competent starter in this league. Now, he's 34 years old, I believe, and obviously, if you have Ryan Tannehill on your team, you're probably looking to upgrade at some point, as the Titans the past 2 years in the draft have shown you, just drafting Malik Willis and Will Levis, using draft picks on those. But He's just a very solid quarterback. Not great. He actually kind of reminds me of the next guy we're going to look at, which is Jimmy Garoppolo, Mr. Handsome. Now, thing with Jimmy, you know, his stats are very good because of Kyle Shanahan. And I think that's one stat line that people really understand. Because sometimes people get caught up in like, oh, statistics. Yeah, but maybe there's some missing context as far as that goes. But I think most people recognize that Jimmy Garoppolo was basically carried by the Shanahan system. He can just check it down to Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey. I guess he didn't have Christian McCaffrey for all that long, but you get what I'm saying. I don't know. He is a starter in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't think he's that great. He just doesn't have really any traits that stand out all that much. We'll see what he can do in Las Vegas. He does have arguably the best receiver in the league, Devontae Adams, to throw to. He reunites with Josh McDaniels, Josh Jacobs. We'll see if he is an upgrade or a downgrade from Derek Carr, but I think 23 is a good slot for Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe some of you would rank him higher, some of you lower. I'm not exactly sure, but that is where I have him. Moving on to number 22, Mac Jones. Now, I don't see him as a high-end starter, although I think he gets a lot of unnecessary hate. When last year, his offensive coordinator was literally Matt freaking Patricia. So, I think there's just a lot of unknown. He had a decent rookie season where they made the playoffs and got absolutely crapped on by the Bills. And honestly, just like Trevor Lawrence with Urban Meyer, I just don't count a year where Bill Belichick did something moronic, having Matt Patricia as the offensive coordinator. Now they brought in Bill O'Brien, who as a Texans fan, I can confirm he is a good coach, just don't make him GM. And he's a really good offensive coordinator. And I think there's a chance that Bill O'Brien rejuvenates Mac Jones' career. We'll just have to see. At number 21, again, this is based on projection, Bryce Young. Really, who knows, but history tells us that quarterbacks drafted at 1 overall are very solid at the very least, whether it be Trevor Lawrence as of recently or Baker Mayfield in the past, Jameis Winston, blanking out, Jared Goff. They were all at some point very solid starters, so I see very little possibility of Bryce Young just being a complete bust and a backup. We're out of the league in 3 years. Now, obviously, his size is a concern, but he has some elite playmaking abilities, can scrambles, move around, things like that. So I believe in Bryce Young as a starter. We'll see if he can ascend from here, or if he's just going to be like Tua, to where we're not exactly sure, and he would need a stacked receiving core to succeed. Moving on to number 20, Kyler Murray. You know, Kyler, it wasn't great, and he was injured last year, which I am taking injury into consideration with these. I do think he has the talent to be like a top 10 quarterback. I'm just not sure that he's reached it yet. And sadly, I don't think Jonathan Gannon is really the guy to help him with that. If I were the Cardinals, I'm sure they probably went after these people, but I obviously would have gone after Sean Payton. I'm sure that had been tried, but some offensive guy, Ben Johnson, I don't know, just some guy, Shane Steichen. I would much rather have an offensive guy to try to work with Kyler Murray, especially since you just paid him a ton of money and really you're just trying to invest in him. I don't believe that the Cardinals are going to draft Caleb Williams. I believe that either they're going to be too talented to tank, or even if they get in that situation, they can just trade the 1 overall pick and just build around Kyler Murray. So we'll see where that goes. And in the same draft class, a tale of two interesting quarterbacks in that 2019 draft class. Daniel Jones. Honestly, I don't have a lot to say. I mean, we all know the storyline. He was going to be a bust, then Brian Daboll saved his career. He didn't do a lot passing, but he did do a lot running. And unlike Justin Fields, that actually won games, which is why he's ranked higher than Justin Fields. So we'll just see with Daniel Jones. I think, again, he did get extended. It wasn't some like massive extension, but he did get extended. So there's still a lot of unknown with Daniel Jones, as is there with a lot of these guys, to be frank. But we'll see. I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but we're coming down the home stretch. We have 2 more quarterbacks to go after. That was a weird way of putting it, but we have 2 more quarterbacks to cover, and then we'll have covered the bottom half of worthy starters, of players, quarterbacks. I'm on a roll today. All right, 18, Derek Carr. He was in a screwed situation in Las Vegas, although he wasn't great, so again, a lot of unknown. We'll see what he can do in New Orleans. He did have a great season like several years ago when he was an MVP candidate. Then he got hurt and was never really the same there. I think he is a competent starter and a better than a lot of these guys, but honestly, the season he had last year just doesn't really sit well with me, so we'll see where that goes. And at number 17, this is going to piss a lot of people off that I have this guy in the bottom half of starting quarterbacks, Brock Purdy. Now, the thing with Brock Purdy, he was impressive. As a starter, he was 7-0, right? I think, including playoffs. I could be mistaken, though. And basically his only loss was the NFC Championship, where he was hurt, so he didn't even really lose the game. I think his passer rating was like 102 or something like that. He balled out. Although, I just, let's see what happens. It's sort of the same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo, to where I think Jimmy Garoppolo has like the 6th highest passer rating like in the history of the NFL. Although, you don't really take much stock into that because of the Shanahan system. And I feel similarly with Brock Purdy. Like, I would just want to wait and see. I'm not really going to give him the benefit of the doubt at this point, but we'll just see what he does in the Kyle Shanahan system. He could definitely get up there. I'm not sure that he has that much upside to be like number 5 or something like that, but right now he's at 17, and for being Mr. Irrelevant and just 3rd string going into camp last year and then suddenly starting, that's actually a pretty good start. So, with that said, thank you a lot for watching. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And also, don't forget to tune in to number 16 all the way through on. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.